Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another week of Stage Door Medium. I have the incredible Allyson Kaye Daniel here today. Hi, Allyson.
Hi.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. So I'm going to read you off because she has so many incredible credits and they're so varied that I didn't want to forget. So I'm going to read you a couple of them. So Allyson was not only in Newsies, she was in the national tour of Elf, the national tour of The Color Purple, Ain't Misbehavin', Ghost, the musical, which I have a soft spot for. We're going to talk about in a little bit. Off-Broadway productions of Sistas, Unexpected Joy. She was in, it was Tut's production, right, of The Wiz.
hmm
Super cool. And then Allyson is making her upcoming Broadway debut when Broadway comes back in the upcoming revival of 1776. Oh,
That is
congratulations.
true. That is happening.
It's so funny because when I was set up with you when I was introduced to you digitally, it was funny because I was like, I keep feeling like there's this Broadway show coming for her. And I'm like, and I hadn't read you yet, but I'm like, I don't know if she's aware of it. So I'm like, I'm assuming I can say something to you. And then I talk with you and you're like, oh, it's 1776. I'm like, oh, like no big deal. Like, yeah, she knows. Um,
I did know. It was weird because even when when I first got it and it was earlier this year, and then we still weren't like we were supposed to go on tour and then start Broadway. So even it still felt, a long time away anyway. It still wasn't going to be until 2021 anyway.
yeah.
So I think that's been one of the things that's made me feel a lot less just anxious about it. It's like, oh, well, already this is fine. It already wasn't going to be like the Broadway portion of it wasn't happening until next year anyway. So
Growing up, did you know that theater was it for you, that you were going to be a performer, or did this not come until later?
it was an interesting thing. I am the youngest of three. My parents had me when they were 38. And my oldest sister is 10 years older than me. And my mom always jokes. And when I was younger, I just thought it was not funny. But she always jokes, she's like, if I had you first, I would not have any more kids. And it's just because by the time that she had me, she really was done. Like she was just like, you were so much. I did not know what to do with you. And my mom, she's very practical. Both my parents are engineers. So when I was young, both of my sisters were in choir, and my mom was like, you need to be in choir with them. I need to have a place where I can drop all of you off at the same time and like go do what I need to do and blah, blah, blah. And the choir, our church choir, you couldn't actually join until you were 5 or 6. But I was like 3. And my mom was like, so listen, she needs to be here. She knows all the songs because she just like sit up there with them. And it just turned out that I did. I just was, I like would sing all the songs with my sisters all the time. And our choir director, who it was crazy, she actually was my church choir director was the high school principal of the high school that both of my sisters went to. Whole thing. But she was like, if she is potty trained, because she like just did not like dealing with small fucking children. If she's potty trained, she can be up here. And so I was. And then I just like sang in the choir forever. And when I was young, I didn't know anything about theater, but I had like some favorite movies, and I did not know why until I got older. They were my favorites. So my favorite movies were Singing in the Rain, West Side Story, anything that the Muppets did because I loved the singing and dancing. And then there is a movie that is basically, the movie Pollyanna. Do you know that
Oh,
movie at all?
is that with Haley Mills?
I think so. Yeah, the same girl from
The
Parent
Parent
Trap.
Trap? Yeah.
Yeah, there is a all black version of that called Polly that
Yes.
was also done by Disney that Debbie Allen directed, that Felicia Rashad was in, and I taped it off the TV, watched it all the time. Like it is a full on musical, and so those were the movies that I just watched all the time. I didn't know why I loved them, but I loved them. And then I want to say when I turned about 9 or 10, my uncle found like a summer program that was a theater camp. And it was at Howard University, which is the school that my parents went to, which is an HBCU in DC, which is where I'm from. And my mom was like, I don't care what it is. She needs to do something. She can't be in the house. Whatever this is sounds great. Sure, fine. And that was when I was like first introduced to like theater, because I'd never seen a show before. I mean, like, nothing. And I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This. And I was crazy and I was in love. And then I was able to go to the Performing Arts High School in DC. And then my parents, luckily, also let me go study it for college. And that was it. But I have to thank my uncle all the time because I probably would not have known about it for so long. I was 10, my church did, the whole big trip to New York to see The Lion King on Broadway. This is when it was still at the Amsterdam. We had seats in the balcony. And I was 100% sat behind a pole, so excited, like leaning on my mom, like because so I could see around the pole. And I started crying as soon as the first giraffe walked on the stage. I was in tears. I was just like, I couldn't breathe. I was just like, this is the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was obsessed with it. I used to like warm up when I was in high school to sing along to the Lion King soundtrack. I was just like, yeah.
Can I ask, how do you as a performer deal with, not taking, I guess, rejection too personally?
Well, the first thing that I will say is I am better about all of that now than I probably have ever been in my entire life. Because the truth of the matter is it's easy to stay positive or just, not have such a negative outlook when you're booking, like that. It's so easy. And when I was younger, I went through a period where I, for whatever reason, probably just straight naive confidence, I booked all the time. I booked, like I was going from one job to another job to another job. So it's easy then because you don't have any words, you don't know anything else. And then that kind of starts happening. I think every performer goes through a period where it just feels like you cannot get the next thing, like whatever momentum that you had kind of dissipates. It just goes away, and you don't know why, and you spend so much time trying to figure out why the thing isn't happening. And unfortunately, a lot of times you get stuck in the why isn't it, instead of just being like instead of accepting it. And I was stuck there for a while. For a few years. Not that I wasn't working, I've been lucky enough to always consistently enough work. And it's hard not to compare yourself to other people. To me, it wasn't as consistent as I would have liked it to be someone else. They were like, you're always working, so it's also a weird place to be in, to hear people say you're always working when you yourself are like, I feel like I'm never working enough, or not working the kind of things that you want to be working, which is also different, right? So it's tough. It's a very tough place to be. It takes a lot of mental fortitude. And I think I will say therapy has saved me, because all the mental fortitude that I thought that I had, I actually didn't have. I was just taking it on and not knowing how to do whatever with it, because we're kind of just taught to do that, like it just is what it is. But yeah, it wasn't until I started therapy that I was like, oh, I actually am not handling this maybe the best. I'm just kind of taking it and absorbing it, and it's not going anywhere. And it is a lot of rejection. What I do now between jobs, thanks to my lovely therapist, I have a lot of things. It's not even between jobs so much anymore. It's all the stuff that I do before I even go into the job. That's completely different. I don't have the same need. I don't have the same attachment. I don't have the same desperation for jobs. So whether they come or not also feels different, because I'm not attached to them the same way, which is really difficult. I had a hard time for a long time grasping the idea of like really wanting something, but being able to let go of the attachment of it. And I was not good at that for a really long time. I was like, I don't understand how you can want this thing, but then be like, I'm good if it doesn't happen. But how can you really put yourself in it if you don't want? I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. My therapist and I fight a lot. But I was just like, but now that I understand it more, and I will say there are still some times where I kind of feel at it, and I have to, kind of let the thing go again and build it back up. But I'm so much better at it now, and that's really what's helped, is just I enter everything differently.
Do you find that a lot of people struggle with the idea of until they make it there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I will say I'm one of those people, was, all of that. And I will say it's a big thing in the industry. The industry is set up to make you believe that if you're not on Broadway, then you haven't made it, whatever that means. It's also one of the things I really wish when I was in school, and I went to Penn State, good program, all those kinds of things. I learned a lot there. But one of the things that I really wish they had focused more on is all of the opportunities outside of Broadway. Broadway is so small in comparison to all of the theater work, film work that can happen. And if you think about New York and you think about how many Broadway theaters there are, like 40 or whatever, however many there are, right? Not 100. Yeah. Even if there were 100 and each show had X, Y, and Z amount of people in it, 1,000 people, there's only less than 1,000 people who are on Broadway at any one given time, right? There's a million actors in New York. So the market is so saturated. There's just no, it's an unachievable goal that we don't talk about. Not everyone is going to be on Broadway. It just, the numbers don't exist for it to be a possibility. Yeah. So the fact that we are like, the only way that you can make it is if you're on Broadway, but we're, you know, all these people are paying for degrees and paying for all this training. You're saying you can be an actor, but the only way that you're a real actor is if you're on Broadway, but Broadway only, you know, can support 1,000 people working at a time. Is, we have to do better about that, in my opinion. I'm like, it's a false sense of hope for so many people in so many ways. I do a lot of master classes and stuff now with kids, and I try my best, because kids are my soft spot, not to discourage you. I'm like, if you want to get to Broadway, it's absolutely possible, it's attainable, if it's for you, then it'll work out. But just know that there are a million other things that you can do and still feel the same, you know, the same amount of joy, the same amount of love, the same amount of whatever explosive positive energy, you know, for those things. It doesn't have to be Broadway, but yeah, there definitely is like this end all be all. And I think that happens, you know, as I talk to like my sisters and my other friends who aren't in theater at all, it actually happens in every, you know, every career. There's always like a, you know, if you're a doctor, it's good if you live, you know, if you work in a hospital, but you want to get your own practice, or you like all the things, there's always like something else that you could do. And I guess it's always nice to kind of like have a goal, but again, here's the therapy coming. If you have this goal that you're always reaching for, then what do you do once you attain it? Right? And then you're at this goal. And then I feel like that's also something that no one talks about, is like, we all have this goal of Broadway. And I would love to talk to people who've kind of been on Broadway for a while. And then you get there and it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? So you kind of always have to be okay with like, oh, this was a great place to be. Where else can I go?
When you're preparing for a character, and I guess even during the active process, what do you do to like channel a character and get in touch with them better?
It kind of changes all the time. Just depending, there are some characters that I connect with immediately and I'm like, okay, I think I get this person. And so I, you know, those kind of have an easier time. There are some characters where I'm like, who do I know that reminds me of this person? And that's usually where I'm like, okay, this character seems to me to be like my aunt. So then I'll play my aunt. You know what I mean? Because I have a hard time. For me, I'm always looking for things that connect me to a character, because I don't really want to me, I feel like if the character doesn't have some of you in them, then it's never quite right. It never feels real. So I am always like, how am I connected to this character? And if I can imagine someone that I know, that helps me, because I'm like, okay, well, I know that I'm connected to that person anyway. So that, you know, so I never want to feel like I'm putting on a character. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be my aunt. Yeah. I know this person, like that helps me like, okay, I know this person. I get it, you know, all those kinds of things. The easiest and most difficult one was when I played the lion in The Wiz, because I don't know any lions, obviously. So it's just like, well, what do you do? You're playing a lion. But it was so crazy when it happened. It's a role that I've always wanted to play, and I've never talked about it because it's usually a male role. And I just always wanted to play it. And I was in auditions for it. I just have always loved the lion. I think that that role has like the best songs, and I think that it's funny, and like that's just so me. Like I always want to play like that. That's like what I want to do. It's so interesting. It's just so interesting. And when I was a child in the same summer program, we did The Wiz, and I was, Eveline in the Wiz. Obviously, I was a big witch. And so when I was initially going in for this, I went in for Eveline, and I got called back for something. I got called back for maybe Eveline and the Lion. And I was like, wait, do they want me to do both? What is happening right now? Because I was just so confused by that. And then my agent was like, no, like they want to see you for this and for this. And I was like, oh, okay. And immediately I was like, I really want this Lion. Like I almost didn't even go over the sides for the other part because I was like, I don't want to do that anyway. I was kind of like Lion or bust was where I was. But once I got it, and just realized, well, first of all, it's always people playing it, so you don't have to worry about being a lion. But it was so me. I was so connected to that character. I was like, this is me. I'd be scared. I'd be running around. I am goofy. And my director, Robert O'Hara, who is amazing, he directed Slave Play. I think that was the last show that he had on Broadway. He let me do anything. He was like, whatever you want. He's like, your instincts are great. Like whatever you want to do. I was like literally running through the audience in Tuts in Houston, like just being a lion. I have never had such like a great experience with a character. That was like the most fun.
You brought up such a great point about tapping into people that you know, because as a medium, it's funny, I wasn't expecting to find that parallel there. But here's what's crazy. People will ask me all the time, do you hear what they sound like? And it's interesting. The best way I can describe it is yes and no. So first off, I don't hear, your average medium is really not gonna, and we'll get to Ghost in a couple minutes, because when you watch Ghost, Oda Mae hears him like we hear each other. If you're watching it, like she hears him just like human to human, speaking that both alive. I don't. So clairaudient, or the ability, clear hearing, for me, the way it works is, and I always use this example at when I try to tell people, I would, if you're watching at home, I might say, ready, close your eyes. Can you hear James Earl Jones's voice? Almost 100% of you, unless like you live under a rock, are going to say, yep, I can hear it. It's this beautiful, deep, distinguished voice. Or so what happens with me is it feels like a thought that's being popped in there, but I can hear the tone of the voice. Or if there's somebody I know, or so for example, if there's a character I know from a TV show, that loved one will show me, or I'll hear a line spoken like somebody. So I know they're giving me reference points. So if I'm a huge 80s fan and I love The Facts of Life. So if I hear somebody talking like Mrs. Garrett, I would go, oh, grandma has a real screechy voice. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh yeah. So no, I didn't directly hear grandma talk, but grandma used Mrs. Garrett, Charlotte Rae as the springboard. So that's kind of, or if I hear, Joe from The Facts of Life, I'll go, oh, were they from the Bronx? And they'll say, yes. So they're going to rapid fire throw things at me, right? Or a really bad Bronx accent, where, I wasn't talking to you, Blair. But I mean, that's how it works for me. And I think it's cool because they'll try rapid fire to get me thinking as quick as I can. So I want to talk to you about Oda Mae, because once I found out that you played her, I was so excited, because so obviously if you're watching at home and you don't know Ghost, which you should, if you don't,
again, under a rock, but okay.
Under a rock, like,
I guess.
I mean, I probably knew it too early. I was like 6, like pretending to like move the penny up the wall and stuff like that. And but anyway,
I was definitely young.
That movie scared me as a kid. The part with
me too,
the little gremlins,
the spirits coming to get people. I did not like gremlins. That. I was scared of all kinds of stuff. I was like, no.
I did not like it at all. And it's funny because Bryce Joel, was it Ruben, the screenplay writer who also wrote the musical, they adapted it a little bit. He believed, I mean, what was neat is that he believed the way the film is presented, those were all his beliefs on the afterlife. And I guess when you were starting to play a medium, and it's interesting too, because you also have to be faithful to the script, where Oda Mae is not legit, you know what I mean, until she is all of a sudden. But did you do any type of research on mediums, and what did you find?
I did the briefest of search on mediums for that very reason, because Oda Mae is a charlatan.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do too much research on medium, just because that's not actually what she did. She was kind of playing at this thing, and may I add, very poorly. She's like playing at being a medium so poorly. So I kind of researched like what I thought, if I was Oda Mae and I wanted to start a medium business, but I didn't know anything about it, what would it be like the bare minimum basics that I would need to just kind of understand in order to get it? That was kind of all I looked up, right? So I looked up like, I kind of looked for like mediums in New York and psychics and, you know, all that kind of stuff, especially ones that were like operated like kind of out of homes. I went to two psychics, you know, like when you're like on 8th Ave and there's
with the
some
sign.
woman standing, yeah, with a sign. And I was
they've
like,
got the little,
and I went
handle.
And a little table, and she's passing out cards. And I just kind of went to, and just to like get, because in my mind, that's what Oda Mae did. She was in Harlem doing that, right? And just so I didn't look into it a crazy bunch, just because I knew that I wanted it to be more of a surprise, like really truly for what this, you know, for this woman, and like for her to be really freaked out that it actually happened for her, as opposed to her being like, well, yeah, I guess I kind of knew that it might happen one day, because I knew about it, because she had no clue. She thought it was all lies too, you know what I mean? So she was just like, all right, well, I know that I need to say these words, or like these words are triggers, or I need to pretend like I'm hearing this voice, and you know, like all these kinds of things. And also what I know is I need to ask for money up front, like, you know, that kind of stuff. So what was the most interesting thing about that particular role was trying not to, because if you are familiar with the movie, it's so hard. Whoopi Goldberg won an Oscar for that movie, so it's so hard not to do Whoopi Goldberg. it's just so hard. It's because all of the big lines are her lines.
Yeah.
All of the, you know, Molly, you a danger girl, all that stuff. That's all the lines that you remember are her lines. So it's just like, how do we do this and, you know, make it funny, but make it Allyson Oda Mae funny and not Whoopi Goldberg? Because I've met Whoopi Goldberg. She's so lovely. She's so nice. She actually looks just like my mom. Like my mom was just like Whoopi Goldberg, which has always been interesting. Yeah, I'll show you a picture. I brought a picture of my grandma too. But yeah, like it took a little bit of time for me to just get out of the to get out of her rhythm and actually get into my own rhythm with it. So that was another reason I was like, how would I feel if I was doing this thing and I knew it was a lie, and then for out of nowhere for it to be like, oh no, this is actually real, and now I have to deal with all this stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I know, because I had Googled, because I found it fascinating. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, there was what was called parlor tricks, if you're watching at home, and Oda Mae's studio thrives off them. So for example, there's a fake closet with a false backing. So the medium would come through the false backing, and, you know, she would pop out. Or there were the table tricks, or sometimes they would have people in black in the room with black gloves on. And it's funny when you see some of these new shows like Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway, and even Matilda, a lot of the illusion that's being done is through the old parlor tricks that mediums did. You know, ectoplasm, and, you know, they had things already in their mouth that they would spit up. And there was just one that I learned about where they had kids that would go in the walls, and then they would have apples on strings. And so when they would do like the alphabet, where they would try to they would go through each letter of the alphabet, and then when the noise would happen, it was like the spirit signified each letter. Kids would run in the halls, in the walls, and hit the walls with apples. So I know it's so funny that I feel like that mentality still kind of pervades some people's thoughts when they think of mediums, and then you've got me, and I just have like nothing in front of me, you know what I mean? Like I'm just like, oh, okay. Like there's like no showmanship, obviously.
Right. I'm like not even with you in the room. So like, even if you did have stuff there, I'd still be like, well, now I'm just looking at Jimmy, and he's having a bunch of stuff happening there, but I'm completely detached from, I don't know what's going on with him.
Well, fun story
crazy over there.
So at our house, I laugh about this story to this day. Everything on our house is automated. So we have all the smart lights and all the Philips Hue and whatnot. And it broke my heart like years ago. And I had, I had to clarify. So I have a client come in, and this is when I was doing readings out of the home office, and um, I sit her down and I'm like, I've got your grandma here. And I'm like, I've got this name. And she's like, oh yeah, that's my mom's mom. And I'm like giving her specific pieces of information. However, you can set up your home automation. So at certain times of the day, you can change the light. So if at 7
Yeah.
p.m. you want it to run, like be a more relaxing tone. So 7 p.m. hits right as I bring forward the grandmother and the lights change. And so this woman's like, Grandma, is that you? And I'm like, no, I'm like, that's not Grandma. I'm like, I'm like, Grandma's here, but I'm like,
Sorry,
Grandma's not.
sorry.
So I guess going into the talking about mediums and mediumship, if there's anything that you feel comfortable sharing, since you'd just been to psychics really, and I think not mediums, right? You hadn't been to a medium, right? Before.
No, I had not been to a medium. They're actually a lot harder to come by than one might think.
When I meet somebody, I'm like, don't tell me anything. I always say, don't feed the medium. Don't tell us more than we need to know, because and that's not to discredit, that's not to discredit people with psychic ability, by the way, or from earlier,
Right.
but psychics, it's a lot easier to just go, oh, I think this is coming for you, or I think this is, because 10 minutes later you're gone. You know what I mean? You're gone from that experience. The medium, you hit the nail on the head. We have to provide evidential information, aka
Right.
specific things that no one else would know. And there's that moment in Ghost that I could be watching it. I remember when the tour came to Buffalo, I remember tearing up because they hit the nail on the head. It's when Oda Mae gets brought down to Brooklyn, and she hits the buzzer at Molly's door, and she was like, look,
Mm-hmm.
I've got Sam here. Who is that?
Yeah.
And then finally she was like, he loves you. And she's like, he would never say that. She goes, leave me alone. And then Oda Mae says ditto. And
Yeah.
I have goosebumps right now talking about it. And that type of stuff, it might not be a specific word like that, but when you go to a medium, that's what we strive to do, is to bring forward those little bits of information that no one else would know, because that's how we have to validate that this was
Right.
genuine. Because you can't just go, well, I've got grandma here. Statistically, everyone has lost their grandmother.
Yeah.
Then if you are a charlatan like Oda Mae, they might go, oh, sorry, maybe it was a great grandma.
Right.
They made me
So you
feel.
try to finesse it to
Yeah.
make it work.
I love when Oda Mae goes, is it a woman? She's like, no. Is it a man? She goes, yes. Oh, I knew it. It's where as a medium, you have to just tune in and listen. And if you're wrong on something, like if I misread something, I'm straight up going to say, all right, I misread that. That's my bad. Instead of going, that's what I thought. That's what I was going to say. That's bad practice. So, can I guess if you feel comfortable sharing, can you share anything about our reading together? Like, what did you make of it?
Yes. So I will be so honest. I came into it very open, but I had no real thoughts or feelings. I was like, I don't know if I believe in mediums or not. I will say that had this opportunity come up before my therapy years, which is easily over 3 years ago now, I probably wouldn't have done it, because I'd been like, no, thank you. That doesn't seem like anything that I would be interested in. But I'm just way more open to stuff now. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, sure. So, right. So, but I was like, this is interesting to me. Let me see. But I didn't come with any expectations, is what I will say. I wasn't, expecting, if it was good, then great. And if it wasn't, then I was like, well, that was a fun thing that I did that happened, carrying on. And then you read me twice, actually. You did a mini read when we were just scheduling the read, which I kind of kept to myself, because I was like, that was so accurate. I'm not really sure what to do about that. So I'm just gonna wait for the whole read, because maybe that was a fluke. That was my brain is always trying to sabotage me, That was my brain coming in and trying to sabotage me. So I was like, I'll just keep it to myself. Then once we had our full read, once I had my full read, it was so unbelievably accurate that I had to cross check with my sisters. I was like, no, wait. So there was the one thing in particular that I was like, wow, you were I've lost both my grandmothers at this point. One of them I lost earlier this year. But one was my father's mother, who I lost a while ago. And you were so adamant. You said, your oldest sister knew her the best. And I was like, yes, because she passed when I was very, very young, like 9 months maybe. He said, your sister has something of your grandmother's. She has like a jewelry box or jewelry in a box. And you kept saying it. And I was like, I don't know. I had no clue. And so I just like very casually, my sisters and I talk every day. I was like, hey, do you have like jewelry of Grandma Lily's or something? And she was like, I kept saying, because you kept saying it's like jewelry or box, or she has like a jewelry box. I just kept saying jewelry and box. Yeah. My sister literally goes, I have this music box of hers that she got from Japan that I keep with all of my jewelry since I left Mom and Dad's house. And I was like, well, everything is weird and upside down and it's crazy here. And they were like, what's going on here? And I was like, I got read by a medium yesterday and I didn't know if I was going to tell you guys. And now I have to tell you everything. And then I was just like, all these things. And they were like, you went to a medium? I was like, I didn't go anywhere because of the pandemic, but I got read by one. It was like, so I believed it. Like there were so many other things that happened that I knew were true that I didn't have any reason to really not believe it.
Sure.
But like, then I just was like, I'm just going to ask. And then I asked, and it was so weird too. I talked to my mom the next day, just like randomly talked to her. And we had talked a lot about like, about her and her relationship with my grandmother, with her mom. And so I was just talking to her that day. I didn't even tell her that I'd seen a medium. And she just started talking about my grandma, which she has not done since my grandmother passed. And I was just like, and then a bird died on my balcony. And I was like, well, this is...
And then you
all crazy.
Which,
and then I texted you because I was like, I don't know what's happening.
And let's clarify really quick at home. If you this is a great learning moment. If you find a dead bird, if a bird hits your window, something like that, that is actually not a bad thing. That signals release of pain, release of something that's
apparently
down, and it's all symbols of growth. So if you find a dead bird, it is not something that you should fear. This is another one of the times in American history where we are at a revolution. We are at our own civil war, our own civil discourse, our own revolution. Like we are here. This is like, it is so interesting. Those 2 weeks that we did workshops and we were basically just learning about the American Revolution, learning about 1776, learning about that whole time period. The similarities between then and now are, insane. It's absolutely crazy. So I think this show is needed in order to really have a better understanding of our country. Because I think one of the biggest misconceptions, especially with this whole Make America Great Again, and one of the speakers, we had lecturers from Harvard who talked to us during these workshops. And one of the things that he was kind of beating into us was this idea that the country never ever really was truly great. It was an idea, but it never really was. So it's, whenever people are saying we're trying to get back to this greatness, it's like, it never existed. We never actually created it. This country was founded with men who were young, with a few of them being on the older side, who fought with each other all the time, who, disagreed about everything, who, and they did not make a perfect document. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, these are not perfect documents. These are all ideas, and they never were perfect. So the idea, of us trying to get back to something that never was, something that we should have, held on to so tightly anyway, is insanity. And it's why our country has not worked yet. Because we keep saying, oh, well, if we could just be more like the founding fathers, like, they were terrible. They slept with each other's wives and sued each other all the time, and they were awful. They were awful, awful, awful. I mean, there were some redeeming qualities about them, and everyone wants to bring up, well, Thomas Jefferson this, and somebody released their slaves, and blah. I'm like, Thomas Jefferson didn't have slaves the whole time he was Thomas Jefferson. If we want to talk about the pain of a person, was he struggling as a human? I'm sure that he was, but he also did let this terrible thing go on for a very, very long time. I'm not saying these people allowed these things to happen. This was not just because they did this one semi-great thing. If however you want to
say it, does not make them perfect. And we should not treat them as such. We should learn from the mistakes that they made and then correct them and move our country forward into the way that maybe they were thinking somewhere in their brains, even though they never really fleshed it all the way out, that this country could be. So we actually had a lot of talks about why it's important for this show to happen now, and why it's important for it to be told this way and not, tradition. Because 1776 is about a bunch of middle-aged white men making rules. There are that is not what this cast is. It's not going to be told from that perspective. Our director is not that, and almost no one on our team really is that. So it's just the idea that has been presented to us is like taking this story and trying to kind of turn it on its axis and present it from a different angle so that people have a better understanding of what it is. Because if you keep hearing this, representation matters, because keep hearing the same story from the same perspective all the time, then eventually that, whether it's true or not, is what becomes true, right? So how then do you correct that? That's really one of the biggest issues with America, right? Is that all the stories get told from the same perspective all the time, whether they're true or not. And most of the time, they just aren't true. There's a whole other thing that happened to this whole other set of people who remember it completely differently. You know what I'm saying? And try not to get upset, but it's just one of those things where it's like, it's so important, especially because people still, even now, try their best to like get you to not hear these other sides and to not understand that it's like, no, that's not really true. Like even now, it's just like, yeah, I think it's why it's important for it now, so that people can see like, oh, this thing that we keep trying to get back to, it just like never actually existed. So that if we can see that, know it, and accept it, then we can actually start moving toward the thing that we want. That's what the issue is, right? It's like everyone would have to accept it and then do the thing, because right now we keep going, well, but what about, but what if, but what? It's like, no, that thing never happened. We all collectively have to accept it so that we can now move forward and make this country that we're actually, trying to make.
If you had to be a ghost and you were stuck in a theater for all of eternity and you could only see one show over and over and over, what show would it be?
Gypsy.
Okay, we got to keep a tally now, because that was my choice, and that was already Jenny DeNoia and Haley Pachoon. So this is like three out of Gypsy, a good production of Gypsy, not like
production of Gypsy,
not like a bad one with like
no,
it's got to be
like a high school version.
Any character that you've played in the past that you think would benefit most from seeing a medium?
Any character that I played in the past that I think would,
this one always
any character in The Color Purple,
okay,
would benefit from seeing a medium.
Yes,
any of them.
Agreed. Yeah. Performer that you met backstage that has left you starstruck for a couple moments. You're like, whoa.
There's a bunch of people. I freaked out when I met John Tartaglia at the Muni, and then was in the show with him when I did, what was that? Oh, Susical. And he played the Cat in the Hat. He was so good, just unbelievably funny. I freaked out when I met Julia Murney. I freaked out when I met Norm Lewis. I freak out a lot. There's a lot of people that I'm like, and I'm a weird freaker outer because I don't want them to know that I'm freaking out. So I'll just like stand and stare at them and like pretend. So I don't want to be like that person. I'm just gonna wait till you're not busy, and then I'm gonna come back, I love you, and then I'm gonna walk away.
I gotta thank you so much for coming on. This was
yeah,
a joy to have you. I'm gonna put your handle up there, because not only are you this incredible performer, you also knit, right? You have hats. You
I do. I have my own crochet and knitting page on the socials as well, and I saw my cousin actually runs a store called Couture du Jour on 44th and 9th. And some of my things are being sold there, but I also have a page up, an Etsy page. So I sell things there, and it's the winter time. So
there we go. And then when Broadway is back, get your butt over to New York and see her in 1776. It's going to be great. So I thank you again. And when I'm back in New York, we're getting coffee. We'll get Alex. We'll all meet up and we can talk some more.
Yay, that would be lovely.
Thank you again. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.